right, everybody. I'm guessing if you're this far, you saw the other video and you're like, hey, I want to maybe do this with my classes. So here's the next step to that. Some of the actual nuts and bolts of using the program. Once students have their page set up, whenever they log in or you log in, this is their kind of splash page that they'll come into. All their old designs as well as ways to create a new design. If you want to learn some more, if they want to learn some more, again, some of this will be a repeat from what I said before, but it never hurts. I would highly recommend having students do all of the starters. That's basic. I would maybe recommend also that you do all the starters if you want to have a chance to give them some decent direction. It's very straightforward, pretty intuitive. I've talked to people I've never done CAD before that have learned the system basically within 15 minutes to really get the hang of it. I would do the direct starters, different lessons you can do, mention that. Projects, there's a section under here that I would kind of recommend. I mean, the TinkerCAD house is kind of neat, but the Let's Learn TinkerCAD, that's also a good thing to do. It goes through, shows you navigation and menus, scaling objects, all of that stuff, which is very helpful. If you choose to do it, cool. Or you can just go by what you see here, and then we will go from there. So if you always hit back, top left, Autodesk TinkerCAD, that should bring you back to your base page in order to begin a new design. So I've already messed with this in a little bit, so let's go back into it. Let's tinker this. Going to go through some very, very basic kind of things. To explain it very generally, this is just a drag and drop interface, and it's solids based. So it's basically like drag in a solid, reshape the solid, and then if you like how it looks, cool, you can add another solid to that solid to make a complex shape, or you can bring in something that's negative space and combine it to where now there's like a hole or just a missing piece of whatever. So let's go ahead and get this started. Let's drag in a box, click and drag. Now I'm going to go ahead and tell you that I am using a PC and I'm also using a mouse, and I do have a trackpad, and it might give some extra things on the trackpad, but usually I use the mouse. Most of you probably will not use a mouse, so I will try to give you trackpad instructions where relevant. This works on your Macs, this works on Chromebooks, which is awful nice, but my interface and yours will be slightly different, so mess around if I forget to tell you exactly what yours is, but it should do a pretty good job of explaining it if you go through the tutorials. So I've got a box in here. I've got corner highlights in order to click and drag out, so I can change my shape pretty rapidly depending on which thing I'm going for. I've got these arrows where I can spin and rotate my shape. I can actually choose on any of these things to type in specific measurements if I wanted to, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment. I highly recommend, it's not guaranteed, it's not whatever, but I recommend dragging a ruler in every time. And I do this just simply to start building the foundation of, you can start getting some coordinate plane information on it. The second you click on a shape, you see numbers. If you're, just messing around with some younger students, yeah, cool looking shapes, and blend them together, whatever. But by the time they're in 5th grade, they should have a decent sense of some measurements and millimeters at that, point, because they're still probably used to using a whole lot of inches. And the only time they see millimeters is just with an mm next to a number on a sheet. So this will give it some reality to their actual build. So there's my box. I can click on numbers and change the size of it, and that's another reason I like having the ruler in here. So I'm just clicking on it. This would be left click or single click, I guess, on the trackpad. This number right here will actually elevate the whole shape off the ground. And so now this is a right click. I use a right click and a drag on my mouse to actually rotate this. and I believe also if I right click and drag on my scroll pad, it works. Over here on the left, like if you have a mouse, the center wheel, scrolly, that is actually a zoom in and zoom out. If you don't have that, which most of you I'm guessing will not, zoom in and zoom out here on the sides, fit to view, and then the home, which your students will use a lot in order to get it back to that basic thing. Top left is a view cube. This is seen in a whole lot of different design programs. It's basically a 3D representation. If you click a corner and drag it, or just click on a face or an arrow, all sorts of things, you can actually move this shape around where you get a good sense of it. So I'm going to put this back down, and then I'm just going to click and drag some shape to this so you get a sense of what's going on. If I click not a corner and just any part on the shape, I can drag it wherever I want to go, and you can see the reference numbers here from the bottom corner are changing. You can also force these numbers in order to move that corner where you want it to go. I don't know how specific you tend to get on stuff like that, but I don't find it that important. If you look at this menu, your shape menu, this is a solid shape. You can actually change it to negative space. We'll talk about that in a second. So I'll just go ahead and click off of that. So now we have a shape in. Now I can click in a negative space cylinder or box, but just to let you know, if I drag in a sphere, I can make that negative space just like that. So this right here will actually let you change that. Delete on that. So let's say we've got a shape and we want to put a hole in it. So there's my cylinder, and now I'm going to make it bigger. So I'm going to drag this out. I'm going to make sure it's still a cylinder by making sure both of these measurements are the same. And then I'm going to drag it over my shape. Oh, but it disappears. Here's the thing whenever students are messing with negative space. Since you're subtracting it, it's basically like a big eraser. And as we all know, like you can actually erase on places that aren't the line. So I always tell them to make your shapes bigger than you think it needs to be. And so let me get in here to where I can get my little cone here at the top. And so now I've got this, and I can click and drag this in. So this part that's sticking off the top is going to disappear off the screen entirely, but it's good for students to like get a sense of where it is. Now, those of you that have done a lot of PCs work before, the control key is usually what you're used to hitting to like get multiple items at once. Well, in this program, that's basically the shift key. You'll use the shift key a lot, so go ahead and green that in your students. So I'm going to click and hold shift. My cylinder is already highlighted, and now I'm going to click on the solid rectangular prism, and so now they're both selected. And now you'll notice up here that this menu has changed. So what are these menu things? If you just hover over it, it's going to show all the different parts and pieces if you've got something with lots of different pieces already in it. This right here is an important part that I'll show you here in a moment. The group. Again, this whole idea of this program is I've got solids, I stick them together, and then I say, all right, program, make those all one shape. And that's what grouping does. And it's important, especially if you're going to 3D print it. If you're not 3D printing it, it's still helpful because it keeps things from shifting around. But some people just want things to look cool. And one of the bad things about grouping is once I group two shapes, they all become one color. And that's kind of a downer sometimes for students. Over here is the align tool. Super handy. It allows you to align shapes within shapes or on shapes very rapidly. We'll use that here in just a moment. And then the mirror shape. The good thing about all of these is they allow you to preview them before you do anything crazy. So if I've got this shape and I want this cylinder in the center of it, could I come over here and type in my measurements and then make this exactly in the middle of that? And by measuring it and moving this over, absolutely could. But there's a faster way. So let's go ahead and do that using the align tool. If I click the align tool, you'll notice that these different little dots show up. And these dots are representations, you can see when you hover over them, of where that shape would move if you click the dot. Like, do I want that cylinder on that edge? Do I want it in the center? And you can click multiples before you click enter and are done. So if I want this in the center, I want it on the center that way, and then I want it on the center that way. And then once that's there, click enter, and click off. And so that's there. From that, it's still not the same shape. I'm going to hit shift again. So now I've selected both. I know that I'm aligned because I just did it with my align tool. Now I'm going to group these together. So again, I had to hit shift. I select both shapes. Now I click group. And now I've put those shapes together. And you'll notice that that hole didn't go all the way through. That's going to happen to students as well. Why was that? Well, it was because whenever I made the initial shape, I didn't make it long enough down through. And sometimes that happens. I can click ungroup and then come over here and reset this again. I can click my cylinder, just my cylinder, and I can drag it down. See, that was a little bit up. You'll find out that students and yourself will do all sorts of crazy stuff. So now I'm going to shift, click both pieces again, regroup them, and now that hole goes all the way through. Pretty straightforward as far as that goes. Other different things, Scribble, just click and drag that in. Students really like this one because now they can actually basically free draw like whatever they want. And then there's the thing. You can actually set it to where your drawing path creates a solid, or if it's just a line. So if I wanted to create a shape, this is how I would make my blob. And then underneath where I am, let's get this out of the way. Click done. And now that has imported into your drawing. And now you can move and modify it in any way that you see fit, as well as whatever you want to do. So students can actually freehand draw some things and get them in and be a part of the whole thing. That's pretty much most of the basics. Again, you can see a lot of different shapes that students can just drag in and mess with. Whenever I first introduce it, I don't get too fancy with it. I basically say, this is how you drag in shapes. This is how you group them. Now make day one just something that you think's neat. And then maybe day two, be like, all right, use your TinkerCAD to make a person. And then you can tell them things like, make sure that you're grouping all your parts together so it looks like a real person. And you can start off by just visual and shape and getting used to the interface. And then later, if you feel the need, you can get more specific. Some groups and teachers actually use this program to create products that not only are they 3D printing, but that they're using in competitions. I know Ms. Gladden at East Burke uses this program a whole lot and used it to print off parts for their competition pieces at the last year's MADE competition. I'm going to come back with another video showing you how to import some parts and then integrate them into a design, because that's when students' minds can really race and go. So I know it's a lot all at once, but honestly, if you can just get them to drag and drop and then manipulate 3D pieces, it's a step in the right direction. And also, for those of you that do have iPads, there is a TinkerCAD app that will work on an iPad. I've not tried it on Android, maybe. But it's kind of neat. And it also has a feature where you can actually do an AR representation, augmented reality. So whatever your students create, you can come up here, and I think it'll be an icon up there that says look, see in VR viewer. And then you click it, and then you just point it at a desk or a table or something, and their design shows up on the desk, and you can actually move the iPad around. And that's pretty cool too. That's a really fast way to engage students. And then you'll find them actually starting to come up in your class, be like, hey, I got a project for this other class. Can I use TinkerCAD to do whatever? And, well, hopefully. Anyway, I'll shut up. And come back for the next video if you want to know how to use Thingiverse in order to really up the level of your designs very rapidly.